As grazing managers, what's your #1 fear during the grazing season? There's a few kind of ideas that I want to touch on a bit to kind of get the wheels turning. I know you've had a very practical morning so far. This is more of the thinking about the big picture sort of grass management stuff. So, who's seen a graph like this before? I guess we'll start with that question.
I haven't. I've had it in my head because that's pretty accurate.
Okay. Anyone else seen one like this before? A few of you? Okay, for those of you who have not, because I know a few of you are going, what on earth is this graph, Christine? This is a representation of how fast grass grows at different times throughout the growing season in Ontario. So, starting off in April, green up, things are a little bit slow. As we move into May and June, we see grass growth rates really pick up quite dramatically, right? You guys probably have heard of this called the spring flush. You go from like, oh, not a whole lot of grass out there to holy smokes, my livestock cannot keep up. There's grass coming out our ears, it's waist high, all the grass, right? That's kind of May into June. All of the cool season perennial pasture grasses that we typically grow in Ontario want to head out before the summer solstice. So we are June 17th right now, 21st, 22nd is kind of the longest day of the year, depending on what the year is. Grasses want to head out before then. So if you look around us right now, pretty well all of this grass has headed out, right? You've got all of these seed heads happening. This is grass that is basically getting biological job done, okay? It's been rushing through that spring growth, trying to get to this point where it can head out, set seed, happy grass. From this point, once we get past the summer solstice, we start moving into July, we start to see a sharp decline in grass growth rates. Anyone know what we typically call this time of year into July and August? Yeah.
Summer slump.
Summer slump, absolutely. Growth rates just slump. This is part of two things. Part of it is that grass physiology, right? We've already hit physiological maturity, so seed has been set, grass is going, cool. I'm done, I'm finished. I can just kind of hang out for the rest of the growing season, do a little bit of photosynthesis, not work too terribly hard until it's time to harden off for winter. So at that point, we start to see a bit more tillering and leaf production again as the grass needs to generate some more sugar to put into storage as starch. So in grasses, typically that's in the lower stem. In our legumes, that tends to be more in the taproot. They like to really store their starch underground in our legumes. So that's part of why this grass growth has slowed down. We're in the middle of the year. Grass has set seed. It's not ready to harden up for winter. So there's a natural slowing down of grass growth rates at that point. The other component that plays into that summer slump is weather. Most of our cool season perennial grasses grow the fastest when temperatures are between 15 and 25 degrees Celsius. They can grow when it's colder, they can grow when it's a bit hotter, but that sweet spot is that 15 to 25 degrees. They also are very thirsty. Grasses use a lot of water. Like, I think if grasses could have their wish, they would want a good rain, like a nice, gentle, effective rain, probably like once every 3 days, all growing season long. Obviously, our climate doesn't do that, right? We're in Ontario. In the spring, we might get that some years, but by the time we get into summer, as you all know, most of our precipitation is thunderstorms kind of once every 2 weeks, right? So it's a lot more rain all at one time, and then dry spells until the next thunderstorm. So what that means for our grasses, obviously they survive that kind of climate, otherwise we wouldn't be standing in a perennial field of grass. But it does mean that it's not their ideal growing conditions, so that reduces growth rate, okay? So as we get into the summer slump, we have this combination of grass physiology and weather coming together to really slow down those growth rates, okay? The final part of this representation, this graph here, is kind of, we get into that early fall time and we sometimes see that pick back up, right? We tend to get more regular rainfall usually. We get some slightly cooler temperatures and the grass knows that it needs to store some energy to get through the winter, so it's got something to grow from in the spring. So we often see a bit more tillering into the fall, okay? So that's what we're looking at here. Now, as grazing managers, what's your #1 fear during the grazing season? Running out of grass. Running out of grass is most grazing managers' #1 fear. So we know that weather and biology are contributing to this, and it's gonna happen every year. So as pasture managers, you should be being proactive. How are you gonna manage through that summer slump? Because too many people graze along going, oh my goodness, too much grass, too much grass, too much grass. Now I'm out. And they didn't have a backup plan. So they're chucking the stored forage at their livestock, right? So what I want to encourage you today as we talk through some of the data and the tools that I brought with me is how are you going to be proactive knowing this is gonna happen every year, this summer slump. It might be 2 weeks, it might be 2 months, right? Because that weather component will influence how long it happens. But we know that there's going to be a time during the year where grass growth rate does not keep up with animal demand. And you as a manager have to figure out how you're gonna address that. Okay, so there's something about this graph that has always annoyed me. And maybe this is just because I'm a bit of a data nerd. There's no y-axis. How fast is fast? How slow is slow? How do I know how much grass I have in front of me? I want to encourage you to start thinking about this in a proactive way rather than a reactive way.